today. For those of you who don't know, Mark is ex professional triathlete. He's now the face and the very much the lead on GTN, which is Global Triathlon Network. Mark's I've had the pleasure of knowing Mark for about 7 or 8 years now, and he's helped me with my triathlon career, albeit very limited. So yeah, Mark, I'm gonna hand you over to Mark. If you just don't mind making sure that you're on mute, there will be an opportunity to interact, which Mark will explain as we go. But yeah, if you could mute when you're not talking, that would be great. And yeah, enjoy. Thanks, guys. Over to you, Mark.
Brilliant. All right. Well, hi everyone, and thanks, obviously Ross and Jonathan for Ascend 360 putting this on this evening. So as you all know, I'm here today to talk about when life gives you lemons. So those ups and downs in life, when things don't necessarily go quite how you had hoped or planned. So I want to explore that today, and also I want you all hopefully leaving feeling slightly well, more equipped when you do have these challenges in life, and to have a slightly different outlook on those challenges when things don't go quite accordingly to plan. So I'm actually going to start by just saying we've actually got quite a nice small group here. So I really want this to be quite a nice interactive chat. So I know we've got a workbook. So if you haven't got that to hand, try to grab that quickly. If not, a pen and paper, that'd be really good. And please do feel free to just jump in at any point, ask me any questions. I'm going to be asking you along the way for, you know, some of the bits as we're filling out that workbook. So yeah, cool. I'm going to get going by just sharing my screen for a very brief kind of intro into myself. Just bear with me 1 second. So hopefully this is working. Can everyone see this?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Okay. So, as the title says, when life gives you lemons. So, I started out as a swimmer at quite a young age. I'm going to keep this very brief. But yeah, I was a national medalist, and that's where I saw my future being in swimming. I, at some point along the line, switched to triathlon and clearly dabbled with some pretty horrific bleached hair at some point. But anyway, we'll scoot over that. And yeah, had a lot of success there. I was part of the British elite triathlon team. I was on world-class funding, a European and world medalist. And I'm now part of Global Triathlon Network, which, as John kind of brushed over before, we are a triathlon media outlet. We're primarily on YouTube, so we have a video going out every day of the week, ranging from how-to videos helping triathletes to train, through to content with the pros, looking at the latest and greatest products that are released, all the way through to doing crazy and stupid challenges, such as Norseman. So if anyone hasn't checked out Global Triathlon Network before, this is Norseman. You jump off the back of a ferry into a freezing cold fjord, and it's basically an Ironman distance, but one of the toughest events in the world. And we managed to do this on Global Triathlon Network. So yeah, we have some great content on Global Triathlon Network, and I'm absolutely honoured to be on that channel now. But what we're here today to talk about, obviously, is our goals, our challenges in life, and these ups and downs. Now, I want to start by telling you kind of my goals. So, from a very young age, I remember wanting to do a few things when I was older. So, one of which was be an astronaut. And I'm sure quite a lot of young kids out there would probably relate to this. Slightly more obscurely, I wanted to be a postman. I'm not really sure where that one came from, but hey. And then the one that really stood out and stuck with me was I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be an Olympian. So that was my big goal. It was my big objective. I became kind of fixed on that from a very, very young age. So this is where I want to get you guys involved straight off. So we've got this workbook, and if you haven't got that, grab a pen and paper. We've got section 1A and 1B in that workbook. And I want you actually to jot down a couple of goals. So ideally a past goal or challenge, something that you've gone after, and a present goal or challenge that you have at the moment. And that can be absolutely anything. It could be work, life, personal. So it could be, I don't know, you're trying to increase revenue in your company, you're trying to buy your first home, you're trying to finish a 5-kilometer run. Anything will do. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds just to jot them down. And if anyone would like, you can unmute yourself and let us know what they are, or failing that, just drop them in the chat. It'd be really interesting, because we're basically going to be using these goals throughout today's webinar. It'd be really nice to kind of, you know, engage with some of those goals that other people have got out there, rather than simply talking about myself. So would anyone like to jump in? I can see John eager to.
Yeah. So my goal is to qualify for the Ironman World Champs in Kona.
Awesome. Cool. Anyone else out there?
Yeah, I'll throw myself in. I've got two actually. One of them is buying a first home, which is on the horizon, and second one is doing a sub 40-minute 10K, which I'm getting very close to. I'm seconds off, but those seconds are quite far away.
That's awesome. That's brilliant challenges.
I think there was another one in the chat from Pete Buckley.
Yeah, so my past one was Olympian, and the current one's Kona.
Fantastic. Are you going in for it this year, or well, obviously?
Yeah, I'm going for it every year. Yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome.
My past one is not to work in a factory again, and I didn't, and to run a marathon, which I did, and the present one is to do a triathlon.
Amazing. Have you got one in mind? Have you targeted one?
No, gotta take my armbands off yet from swimming, so I'm all right. No, I'm all right. I'm getting there. So I should get there this year.
Fantastic.
One from Paul McNeil says he wants to complete a 70.3.
Awesome. Very, very good. Nice one. Okay, I'm going to end. It's a very short presentation, but I just want to sort of intro myself. So ending that there. So yeah, I want to talk about that journey to our goals. Now, naturally, we all think about this perfect trajectory to our goals, smooth, plain sailing. Yeah, you know the deal. That's essentially what I had in mind for my big Olympic dream, my big goal. And well, that's what I want to explore today. As you probably guessed, it was far from that for myself. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'm about to take you on my journey here. It is 20 years of my life, so I'm going to try not to bore you too much and keep this as brief as possible. But what I'd like you to do along the way is kind of relate this to your own challenges, your own goals. And so please do feel free to jot them down in the workbook as you go. And again, as I said at the start, jump in, ask me any questions if you want anything kind of reiterated. So here we go. Now, starting from the very start, I have to admit I wasn't some child sporting prodigy. I wasn't that child that kind of ran laps around people at school in the playing field. I was pretty normal. I was a very goofy young kid. I played rugby, I swam regularly, but mostly just because my parents were swim teachers at the local swimming club. My dad helped out at the local rugby club, and I actually just went along mostly just to see mates. And on a Saturday morning, we used to go and get sweets after swimming and sausage rolls. A bit of an odd mix, but that's what made me tick as a young kid. Now, a big moment in my sporting career was at about 10 years old, and I was bumped up into the top lane of the swimming pool, in the top lane of the swimming club. And now, for anyone that hasn't been part of a swimming club before, the top lane is essentially the fastest lane. It's where all the big kids are. So at 10 years old, this was a big deal for me. Might seem pretty insignificant, but it really was quite big. So I took it upon myself that day to like really show them and impress everyone. So before I knew it, I was at the front of the lane. I was beating all these big kids who were 16, 17. And probably really pissing them off, actually. And then before I knew it, I was doing laps past them, next session came back, coach was like, yeah, go in the top lane again. Did the same thing again. I mean, looking back, it was probably a horrific training method. I was literally going all out in every session, week in, week out. And I was burning bridges with those older guys. But it was really big for me. I started to believe in myself. And soon after that, I was winning the county championships. I set records at county champs. I was winning the Southwest District Championships. And then soon after that, I was scouted onto a swimming team. It was the Team Bath Swim Squad, which sadly doesn't exist anymore for the youth and junior kids, but it was essentially the best swim squad in the country. And we had the Olympians and top swimmers in the world swimming above us. And we were kind of like the pathway to that. So it was a really inspiring playground and squad. Now, I quickly found myself swimming 2 times a day, more or less every day. And you've got to remember, this was around school. So I'll just run you through like a typical day. And it is, honestly, like looking back on this, it's crazy that I was doing this at such a young age. But I was getting up at 4:30 a.m. My parents were very kindly driving me to Bath. I'd swim from about 6 till 8 a.m. I'd then jump out, head to school, finish school at 3:50 p.m. and then I'd start doing my school homework after school for about an hour, because to be honest, that was the only time I had to do my homework in a week. So I had to do my homework then, which actually made me very disciplined. And then I get picked up, have a bit of a snack in the car, do some land training at Bath, and then I'd swim from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m, jump back in the car, home, have dinner around 9:30 p.m, in bed, same thing the next day. And I was doing that at around 11, 12 years old, which sounds absolutely crazy. And why was I doing this? But I was so pumped and so motivated at the time. And we did have a lot of fun. We had a great fun in the squad. We had loads of successes, national medalists, including myself. But it all started to go wrong for me when I was about 15 years old. And that is what we're all here for today. So I had been invited on my first swim camp with actually the GB team and the senior GB team. So we were going to go out to Australia. So imagine that, as a 15-year-old kid, you're going to go to Australia with the GB senior team. The problem was, I just wasn't feeling right in myself. I really felt drained. I was getting ill all the time. I felt tired in training. Coaches started to notice that my times were slipping in training. Despite all of this, I just kept going again because I was just so motivated, and I just did everything the coach said, and I trusted them. Now, the final straw for me was one morning I woke up to go to school, get out of bed, and I literally just couldn't get out of bed. And it was quite, looking back on it now, I remember my mum was crying, like it was quite traumatic for her. It was really tough. Now, sadly, it wasn't just me that ended up in this position. A few other guys in the squad also ended up really run down. And it turns out that the coach we had at the time, it was a new coach that had been in for the last sort of 6 months, was just overtraining us. He wasn't a great coach as it appears. So he has since been fired. But anyway, I found out I had glandular fever. So I had to have a year off. And not just a year off swimming, like literally exercise full stop. So this thing that I've become like so passionate about, so motivated for, was just removed from me. And I was suddenly this pretty sedentary young kid. It was really tough for me. So I could have quite easily at this point just quit, as did some of the other kids in the squad that had also ended up overtrained. But someone recommended the sport of biathlon to me, which is basically swimming and running. Now, this was quite a change, but I thought, heck, what's to lose? I've always kind of run quite well at school and cross countries, but mostly just off kind of my aerobic fitness from swimming. But lo and behold, I went and won the national biathlon championships. Now, this comes with a slight caveat. Probably most of you here don't even know what biathlon is, so it wasn't a very big field. But I won the National Biathlon Championships, and that was enough for me at the time. And I just had a buzz. I started enjoying the sport again. And that's where I suddenly sort of found that natural step into triathlon, adding the bike in. And I loved it. So rather than suddenly like following the black line of a swimming pool up and down day in, day out, I was smashing through waves in the ocean. We were swimming in a squad. We were hitting each other whilst we were swimming, which I know sounds bizarre, but that's kind of fun. I'd always stuck to the lane, and you go up and down and you got to go 10 seconds behind each other. We were racing down the roads on a road bike. You'd be exploring in the outdoors, running up hills, it was absolutely amazing. Admittedly, I had a lot to learn. I was horrific technically on a bike. I ran like a box with my shoulders up like this, but I threw myself right into it. I was loving it, and it sort of like reignited that flame for me in sport. So I threw myself in at the deep end, again mostly out of excitement, and I started training with a squad in Bath, which were again very high level. So I was very fortunate to be able to kind of get lapped up in that squad, and as I said, I threw myself in the deep end. I started racing for a team out in France. I was starting to travel around the world to do racing. Not that I was particularly any good, but I was just enjoying it. Now, actually, I'm digressing here, but the French team racing is quite funny. They pay you to come out and race. They pay your expenses, but quite often they forgot to pay you, which as a young Brit, you're just scared to ask for that money. So there were a couple of times they would drop us off at our hotels ready to get the flights the next day, and they just forgot to give us any money. And as a young kid without a credit card, we were stuck there with sort of €5 between 2 or 3 of us, and we literally were just sharing a McDonald's Happy Meal the night after doing an Olympic distance race. Which, yeah, again, sounds mad looking back, but actually, these were the great little nuggets of experience that they formed me as a person. Anyway, back to my story, my journey. I was soon after that, I was starting to do really well, and I was selected onto the British Elite Triathlon team. So I was on lottery funding. I started to have some really good results. I was podium at the national championships. I had a sprint finish with Johnny Brownlee. I got a silver medal at the European Duathlon Championships, all in my second year of racing. And now it's all sounding pretty good right now. Like, I've got this upward curve again. Well, here we go. This is where it all started to go wrong again. Now, this is where I kind of found out how crap glandular fever can be. Now, as athletes, you're kind of always trying to find your limit, and it's kind of you're always on that knife edge of peak performance and overdoing it. Well, it turns out when I got glandular fever, I contracted something called Epstein-Barr virus, which is actually really common. A lot of young kids get it, and it doesn't really affect them that badly. But if you get Epstein-Barr virus or EBV as a teen or an adult, it can really mess you up. And actually, there's Mark Cavendish has Epstein-Barr virus. There's a lot of people out there that have it. Now, it's sort of the problem with it is it stays dormant in your body. You never really get rid of it. So when you become quite run down, it comes back and bites you in the arse. And guess what? That's exactly what you do on a daily basis as an elite or endurance athlete. So I went to Loughborough University to study industrial design and to train with the GB squad there. But whilst I was there, I had 2 more occasions of this kind of Epstein-Barr virus, this digging myself a hole and having a relapse. And I'd have to take a good month or 2 out each time to recover, which again is just the worst feeling ever. As an athlete, all that hard work's wasted. Your friends and competitors are out there on a daily basis training and improving. But each time I get myself back and get myself to the pointy end of racing, be on training camps, the GB squad, the Brownlee brothers, racing around the world, and of course trying to obviously do my degree. But then I believe it's in about 2010 or 2011, I found out that I had an abnormality with my heart. Yeah, pretty big one. So that was through what's called CRY screening, cardiac risk in the young. So big thanks to them. It's a free foundation. They travel around and they test young kids for abnormalities. And turned out I had one. I was really lucky. Within about a month or two, I was having an operation and had an ablation on my heart. They went up through my groin. They burnt basically the wall of my heart to fill up an accessory pathway, and it's pretty routine procedure, but you know, it's still a big deal, and you know, your heart's quite a big thing as an athlete, and you're really pushing that on a daily basis. So I had to have a couple of months off from training. Again, you know, that is a huge hit. I've just got myself back performing well, and I felt like I was being knocked down again. Yeah, I just felt like every time I get myself back, I was back where I started. But all of that obviously teamed with the fact that I was trying to go to the Olympics for probably one of the most competitive nations out there, meant that my Olympic chances were starting to wear pretty thin. I mean, we had the Brownlee brothers taking up 2 of our spots, and then there's 1 other spot, and there were a whole host of us going for that 1 spot. And you know, a lot of them were full-time athletes, not trying to juggle a degree with that. So I had to achieve that. I had to accept that I wasn't going to achieve this lifelong goal, which was really hard. And I think I'd known that for quite a long time, but I just simply kept going because it's all I knew at the time. And also, I think I started to realize at that point that I wasn't really enjoying it anymore. I remember being at a European Cup in Karlovy Vary, which is a beautiful place in the Czech Republic. They've filmed some of the James Bond scenes out there. And you know, I should have been so happy that, you know, I'm so fortunate to be there racing, and I just wanted to go home. I didn't really know why I was there. You know, I'd lost that enjoyment and love for it. Now, I knew I loved triathlon, but being told kind of what races to go to, what camps I should be on, and chasing points just wasn't really fun for me anymore, and I needed a change. So I decided to focus on other things, new things. I thought I just needed to break free. So that's where I found the ITU Cross Triathlon World Championships. So that's essentially an off-road triathlon. The bike and the run portions are off-road, and I really got stuck into it. I trained hard for it, and I podiumed at the World Championships by a hair. Like, I almost didn't get on that podium, but I got on the podium, and again, that was really good for me at the time, and it gave me a lot of motivation. I soon after that, I graduated, and I decided, you know what, it's time for a real proper change, and not just dabbling in a bit of this cross triathlon stuff. So I switched to long distance racing. Now, this is actually a bigger move than a lot of people probably think when you're coming from ITU short distance racing, because you're essentially stepping away from funding, squad support. You're essentially going solo and fending for yourself. So you've got to find sponsors, you've got to fund yourself, you've got to find a salary. But at the same time, this also gave me a lot of flexibility. So around this time, a few people, I think Jonathan was one of the first, actually approached me about coaching and just some advice for their training. And I did really enjoy that. And again, that was something that sort of helped me. That coaching income gave me a bit of security and stability. I also, at one point, I think it was when I had glandular fever, I had obviously a lot of time off. I taught myself how to use Photoshop, and I got pretty good at editing stuff. I learned some HTML coding for websites. So that was another skill that I thought, well, you know what, I can start making websites for people and things. So again, extra income that allowed me to pursue my dream. So yeah, I started to find this love for the sport again. I wasn't being told where to go, which training camps. I wasn't being yelled at by Alistair Brownlee on training camps, which, look, I love Alistair Brownlee. He's a great friend of mine, but he is an absolute arse on a training camp. And as I'm sure some of you have probably witnessed in the racing, he has a tendency to yell at people. And yeah, I fell victim to that a few times. So yeah, quickly, kind of on this long distance racing, I booked myself in to race my first kind of pro long distance racing. That was 70.3 South Africa. I took 4th place there, and that gave me again a lot of motivation. I continued that season to be on more podiums, and that gave me a new goal. I suddenly became fixed on actually the Olympics. That's gone. Now on to the Ironman 70.3 World Championships and trying to podium at that one day. Now, you're probably going to get bored of this. Once again, we had a low in my career. I overcooked it with my training. Again, I just became so fixed on this goal, and I was over racing. I had no idea what I was doing in my training, and I burnt out. I got myself back in shape, and then I had a mountain bike crash. I hurled myself about 50 meters down a hill and broke my collarbone. I still got myself back racing that year, had a good year, more podiums around the world. And I've got to say, I'm like, at this point, I'm actually quite embarrassed talking about my injury and health track. I don't normally tell people everything that I've done, but that wasn't the worst of it, actually, because in 2015 I started to feel quite odd. Now, I'd become used to this Epstein-Barr virus and the feelings I get from that, but this was different. It just wouldn't go after rest and recovery. It was still there. I felt off, and decided I need to go and get some really thorough blood tests. So I head off to London, and they came back with obscenely high iron levels. Now, for those endurance athletes watching this will know that's really odd. An endurance athlete with really high iron levels, normally you're depleting your iron levels as an endurance athlete. And just to set the record straight, it's not great to have obscenely high iron levels. It actually has kind of the same effects of having low iron levels, but also actually it's fatal because you're putting your organs under so much stress. It's a toxic substance at the end of the day. So yeah, I found out I had a hereditary condition called hemochromatosis. I won't bore you with the specifics of it, but essentially I accumulate iron. I don't get rid of it like everyone else and most people on this call today. So I had to have a ton of vein sections, so essentially just giving blood, so getting rid of a lot of blood in a short space of time to get my iron levels back down to normal. Now, being the naive young athlete I thought, well, yeah, I'll still be back racing this year. I'll carry on training, no big deal, a bit of blood lost, until I tried doing some hard sessions and going up some hills, and it was like someone had taken both of my lungs from me. Because at the end of the day, they've just taken one of the most precious things from an endurance athlete, their red blood cells. So yeah, I realized quite quickly after that I'm going to have a bit of time out from the sport. So I had a year out. Fortunately, one of my previous sponsors, Blue 70, who had been with me from the start, took me in and offered me a job. They were based in Bath at the time, so it was really convenient. And it actually gave me a lot of experience of the real working world, and gave me also a bit of time to think about my training and my racing. After that year, I went back to racing, and I've got to say, it's actually probably the best couple of years of racing of my career, not just from a performance standpoint, because they weren't even some of my best results. It was more actually from an enjoyment standpoint. I was improving, I was enjoying it, had a lovely balance with my life. It was just little things like when I went out to a race, I was factoring in a couple of days or a few days after that race to kind of enjoy the area and see the area, which sounds silly, but it's things I wasn't doing before. I was kind of going out there so focused on the race, doing the race, worried about the cost, and just coming straight home. I had also some of the most memorable races where I really just attacked it and went for it because I just felt, heck, why not? One, for instance, Outlaw Half, I got the record there, but then Weymouth was probably one of the most notable ones because I attacked it off the bike, went solo, and I was doing quite well until about 5k to go, where I blew up catastrophically and everyone just came past me, including one chap that just nudged me off the podium with about a kilometre to go, because he pooed himself to pass me. which, to be fair, at the time he passed me, I was like, wow, that's pretty rogue. But actually looking back on it and reflecting on it, if I could have done the same to have got on that podium, I probably would have. And it made me think, actually, maybe I'm not pushing hard enough in my races. So there was a slight learning from that. But anyway, a year or so on from that, and I'm getting to the end here, don't worry, a friend contacted me about a job at Global Triathlon Network. Now, it was a really tough decision. As I said, I was really enjoying myself. I found this real nice stability in my life. I was improving, I had a good coaching business and a lot of flexibility. That said, it was an amazing opportunity to join Global Triathlon Network, so it'd been silly not to take it. Now then, you remember my original goal was obviously to go to the Olympics. Did I achieve that? No, but that's fine. The process for me of just trying to get that goal and go to it led me on to so many great and fantastic opportunities and new goals, and ultimately goals and things that I'm really proud of. I'm now working at GTN. It's really, I mean, it's a dream job for a lot of people. I get kit thrown at me on a daily basis, often kit that the pros hasn't been released to the market, and I don't even have to race or train for it either. And I get to travel around the world, and you know, I'm having so much fun with that. So yeah, that's my story, that's my journey. Hopefully I haven't bored too many of you there, but I now want to kind of like go back to the workbook. So if you want to grab that or a piece of paper, now if you haven't done so already, I want you to kind of jot down any challenges that you've had on the way to one of your previous goals or your present goal, if you have been going at that for some time already. Any adversities, any hurdles, just scribble them down. You don't necessarily need to be in order. I'll give you a couple of moments for that. And I'm not, don't feel like you need to have hemochromatosis or Epstein-Barr virus, but it might just be you have shin splints, you were going after that half marathon or whatever it may be. And if anyone wants to jump in and just share any hurdles or ups and downs that they've had, please feel free.
Yeah, there's a few questions in the chat there, Mark.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Just whilst everyone's writing that down, I think one of the things that's jumped out to me is one of the things I wanted to know is that in terms of like becoming ill and pushing yourself over the limit, what did that look like? What made you do that, and what were the mistakes that you made?
Initially, and one of the biggest frustrations I have looking back was that I didn't understand what I was doing. So I essentially I followed blindly the plan, and there's a nice quality to that. I had trust in the coach, and I believed in them and the process, but I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know the purpose or the reason behind any of it. So when the coach set a threshold session in the morning and threshold session in the evening, I mean, looking back, of course, that's absurd. Why? Why would I be doing that as a swimmer? So I think that was possibly, that's one of the biggest frustrations, and it's so obvious now with a more mature head on me.
So in terms of like for breaking that down, so threshold being like 2 hard sessions in one day, rather than like balancing it out with like hard, easy.
Yeah, essentially, I just wasn't allowing the recovery. I was, doing 2 hard sessions in a day, and quite often we were doing that day in, day out. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good. I think it's a common mistake for most people. They don't. Yeah.
I mean, and I think also, I think everyone's sort of, we're going off topic a little bit here. This is kind of almost going down the coaching realm, but a lot of people take their training programs and think they've got to stick to it, but you really do need to take into account your daily stresses, bad night's sleep, food, work, like all of those things stresses on your body, and big stresses. Don't underestimate them. And I was studying, I was at school at the time, and young kids going through puberty, all sorts, and it's like those, you need to have the recovery. If you had a bad day at work, you need to back off, or you've got a load of meetings. Like, don't feel like you've got to nail the training, because that's going to just scupper the consistency of the training going forward. So ticking that box and getting the green and training peaks, which I know you do, Jonathan. It isn't simply about that, really. You've got to make sure it's consistent going forwards. Cool. Has anyone else got anything? Have we got any others? I think there's a few ones.
There's some other questions. I think what we'll do is, no doubt, once we open it out at the end, there'll just be an endless amount of questions. So those questions in there, I think if we hold those, and if you, sorry, I've distracted you.
No worries. That's cool. Well, like I said, I've run through my journey there, and hopefully it has been too boring, because it is, it was essentially 20 years of my life. So I've scooted over a lot of stuff, but I actually, now this is the meat of it. I want to bring this all together and pick apart kind of those ups and downs. Now, I'm not actually one for cliche quotes, but I really like this one, and I know Ross will know this one. So here we go. I've missed over 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game's winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. That comes from Michael Jordan. And that guy is an absolute legend. I think what that sort of shows is that celebrating success obviously feels good, but learning the lessons of failure is where growth occurs, and that can lead you on to much bigger and greater things. And if there's one thing I'd like you guys to take away from this, is learning that the failures are part of the process, and you need to kind of enjoy those failures. I know that's that must be really hard to hear, when you might have a stress fracture, or your company's got plummeted or whatever, but you can take so much experience and learning from that, and that is going to help you ultimately to that goal, or on way to that goal, or a new goal. Also staying with the triathlon theme, you probably look at the likes of Jan Frodeno, Javier Gomez, Daniela Reef, and you think, well, but what about them? They just seem like they've got it all perfect. They're up there. They just seem to win everything. No, I've trained with a lot of them. Jan Frodeno, actually, I was out in South Africa training with him, and he was a grumpy bugger for 2 months because he literally couldn't run for the entire thing. This was right after the Olympic Games, actually. Couldn't run for the entire 2 months. He was going back and forth to the doctors. He couldn't push off the wall swimming because he had this Achilles injury. Same with Alistair. Pretty much every year he has multiple injuries. He comes back. Daniela Reef, she wasn't a fantastic athlete in her early days as an ITU athlete, but really, obviously, she had a lot of ups and downs there, but she's really come through, and she's doing fantastic now. Same with, we could go on forever. There's so many out there. So I just think it's important sometimes to reflect and look at that, because I think we quite easily look at kind of social media and look up to these idols and think, we should be having this picture perfect trajectory up to our goals. Now, I've obviously, as you've heard today, I've had my fair share of ups and downs and opportunities to learn from these setbacks. And I think probably the biggest thing is it's very easy to wallow in self-pity when this happens and feel really sorry for yourself. Ultimately, that doesn't achieve anything. So I kind of learned a bit of a strategy, and I had to, because I've had so many ups and downs. So the first off, and this is the hardest one, is accepting what has happened or what is happening. Again, using the injury example, actually accepting that pain in my foot, I probably shouldn't be ignoring that anymore. It's a serious pain. I need to have this looked at. I need to stop running. Like I say, that is so hard to do when you've been putting so much work into your training and you feel like you've been improving. Obviously, then the next step is reviewing. Why did it happen? And how can we prevent this happening again? And then finally, it's what can we do about it? Sometimes nothing, but sometimes you might be able to use this time as a bit of a blessing in disguise. Now, I'm going to use some examples of my own here. So going back to my journey. So the few times that I was injured, the accepting was really hard, obviously, but I took the time quite often to focus on some strength work. I was shocking during my career for actually fitting in strength work around my training, as most endurance athletes are. So I actually used the time to kind of go, well, you know what? Let's focus on my weaknesses. And that might actually mean that when I come back, I'm a better athlete. And a good example of this is 2 months or 2.5 months out from racing Ironman 70.3 South Africa. I crashed my mountain bike, as I mentioned earlier, and I broke my collarbone. Not ideal. I'm going to have probably 6 to 8 weeks of no swimming, allowing my collarbone to repair. So how on earth am I actually going to be able to swim, let alone swim in a pro race? So what I decided to do during this recovery period was essentially become a little bit obsessed with swimming and the technical side of it. I started analyzing certain movements, why you do them, how you'd apply pressure down on the water to give you lift. I watched videos, I pulled everything apart. And as soon as I could get back in the water, not necessarily swimming, but as soon as I could just sort of float in the water and move my arms about without too much pain, I started kind of practicing some of these things. I know this sounds really mad, thinking of this kid kind of floating around in a swimming pool, but it was beneficial for me. So after about a month and a half, I was doing a bit of sculling in the water, getting that feel for the water. And to be honest, that's pretty much all I did for the next 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks or so leading into 70.3 South Africa, I started to actually do my first swims. And obviously they were just easy swims. Now, I head out to South Africa, obviously incredibly anxious, knowing I've missed so much training. And I led the swim out with over 1.5 minutes over the likes of Tim Don, Will Clark. And yeah, you can say, right, yeah, well, you come from a swimming background, but there's no way I should have been putting that much time into those guys. I just put it down to all that work I did there in that time off. And I really took that time as an opportunity. And that stuff that I've taken forwards. My swimming from there on was really good. Another example, whilst I was in that first occasion, I mentioned earlier that I sort of took the time to learn Photoshop, editing photos, learning how to make logos and learning HTML. And that was a really valuable skill that I took forward, that actually allowed me to be a full-time athlete at one point. I've also got an athlete that I'm coaching at the moment in kind of a similar boat. I took him on having, basically he's recovering from an eating disorder. It took a bit of convincing for him to stop training, but I encouraged him to take a good couple of months off and to find a bit of a hobby. He designed an app in that time, and he's now been accepted onto quite a prestigious business incubator. So he's back training healthy, but he's actually achieved something fantastic along the way. And he's a young kid, and one of the first of, below, I think he was below 17 years old, to be accepted onto this business incubator. So what a cool story. Does anyone have any moments like this that they can recall, where they've actually had times out, or they've had a low in their life, their career, and actually it's ultimately been quite good? They've had a little blessing in disguise. Would anyone like to jump in? We got any examples?
We will have. It's just waiting for. I'm going to start picking.
It's kind of an odd one. I think this one takes a bit of deep diving and thinking, because I think a lot of, as I say, we often we really hone in on the negative aspect of these hurdles, these challenges, but it's looking for any of those. Using the example at the moment, and this is. I wouldn't wish COVID upon anyone, obviously, but from a business perspective, actually so many businesses have come out with whole new strategies in the way that they work. I know here at GTN, we work totally differently now, and we will take a lot of that forwards, even when we can go back into the office. Some people, again, I don't want people furloughed for, etc. But like actually being able to spend time with the family initially might have been actually quite nice. So yeah.
Yeah, I think from my own perspective, from a business point of view, we've managed to reset our business, and our productivity in terms of getting the best out of our staff has just gone on to another level. Funnily enough, we don't really have any staff illness anymore. that's quite funny. From a personal perspective, as you know, I haven't really been able to run since November of 2019, and that has been a bit of a challenge. But what it's allowed me to do is to get all my stuff in the background, all my business, and move house and all sorts of stuff in place, just to allow me to then be able to go on to the next phase of racing and training moving forward. So I think, I definitely can concur with that. So Tom Wynn, you've mentioned something there. Do you want to flick your mic off and share that with us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I was just saying that I was furloughed last year, and was able to do a lot of training, which and it was more consistent training. It wasn't necessarily that I was doing a lot more every week, but it was doing consistent every week, which improved my fitness massively. And my aim was Helvellyn, which luckily stayed on, and managed a very improved time. But as I've noted there, I didn't improve on placing because a bunch of ringers showed up.
Was I ahead of you or behind you? I don't know.
You were ahead of me.
I was, because I was in survival mode in that race. But what a race! It's really cool. Has anyone done Helvellyn here before, or are you the only one? No. But anyone out there who fancies a challenging race, Helvellyn is absolutely awesome. It's got a bit of a Norseman-esque feel and vibe to it. In some ways, actually, it's tougher in some elements. But yeah, it's very cool. Well, yeah, no worries. I won't sit on this one too long. What I also want to touch on is about the path that we take. Like, I obviously was looking for that Olympic debut, going to the Olympics, that Olympic goal. I had numerous others along the way. Obviously, wanted to be an Ironman 70.3 world champion or medalist, and I didn't achieve any of those. But as I said earlier, I had an amazing time. Each time I changed paths, it was for a reason, and a good reason. It taught me a lot more than I could ever gain from simply reading books, and that ultimately set me up really well for my role at GTN. And I think that's kind of where I'm trying to go. It's like, I haven't actually ended up at that big goal that I had as a kid, but actually this Global Triathlon Network maybe is that. Like, I've worked my way to something really well, and this perhaps isn't even the end. I might go on to other things from this and learn so much from Global Triathlon Network. So yeah, I'm certainly not saying you should give up on your goals, but I certainly I certainly didn't do that, but ultimately try not to look at these other. Sorry, I'm going to start this again because this is quite an important line because we're rounding out. I'm basically not saying that you should give up on your goals, because I didn't do that, but ultimately don't look at these challenges as a negative, and that ending up somewhere else is a bad thing. So yeah, there we go. That's my talk about when life gives you lemons.
Cool.
That's fantastic. And I know there's some people on here who have dealt with stuff, and it's always hard at the time, but actually on reflection, it's shaped the person that you are now. I think, like you say, if you're able to make the lemonade rather than give yourself a hard time, make yourself feel sorry for it, lots of excuses, lots of stuff to blame. Or you can, like you say, you can use it as an experience to point you in that direction and grow from it. And it's very easy to look back and go, oh yeah, I can see how that worked out, and that's made me where I am now. But at the time, it is bad. But almost what you go through, it then ends up being almost the more you have to go through, the more you sort of learn from the experience. So I think, I mean, that those 3-point strategies, brilliant. Like, I've made a note of them and shared that straight away with some people, because sometimes people just need to have a moment, you know, where they just sit there and go, right, okay, what have I learned from this? Because there's always something to be learned from it. It hurts at the time, and there's always, you're angry, and I get it. And I've had experiences with work and stuff like that, but being able to sit there and go, right, okay, what did I learn? You know, what's gone on, and what can I do to improve now moving forward? I think is massive for people to learn. And I mean, yeah, writing down all those things that happened. I was kind of like trying to put a post out there of all the little things you've gone through, and it was literally just that up and down, up and down, up and down. But the smile on your face now when you talk about the job that you do and the work that you do, that's not going to be too different to somebody who's been to the Olympics. You know, that joy of having that job. And I think people can relate to that because they'll have their own Olympics, they'll have their own goal that they're working towards. And yeah, just seeing you talk about it now, it's really inspiring as well to hear the story. And I know people have dropped some stuff in the chat.
Yeah. So yeah, but first of all, Mark is very much understating what he's achieved and what he's done. So yeah, he's sort of brushed over all the good stuff. And if you Google like his results and stuff, ignore his silly haircuts. There's actually a picture of you with a worse haircut than that one.
Just the good ones.
There's questions from a few people, and I'm going to ask you to ask those questions yourself. So Ian, you've asked a question around Ironman distance racing. You've got to look at your question now, Ian.
I've asked a couple, so I'm just going to find that one again now.
Does anybody believe they can train to achieve an Ironman distance race, given health and time to train, regardless of background, i.e. not particularly athletic?
So anyone can do an Ironman, basically. Is that what you're at? Yeah.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I genuinely do, but it does. I think obviously it's just the starting point that you're coming from and the foundations. So it's I think that's the first thing I do with any athlete is understanding their background and not just are they fit and have done sport before, but also injuries and how robust they are as a person. That will then dictate how long that period and running is to an Ironman. Now, some people are really fortunate; they can come to you having never really swum, biked, or run before, and within 3 months could probably get themselves around an Ironman. Probably not too pretty, but they can get themselves around an Ironman. Other people are obviously going to need a lot longer, and I would always say, you know, give yourself at least a year, you know, good winter, just to sort of like literally go through the motions, get, you know, literally just swim, bike, running, nothing fancy, just kind of getting into the routine and ticking along, and then start doing some specific stuff and loading up a bit more. Yeah, I mean, it's very individual, so I can't sort of give you a time frame for everyone, but I do ultimately believe everyone can do an Ironman. You know, you can walk the marathon if needs be.
So we've got a couple more questions in here. So in terms of the what have you found the best way to develop train your mental strength?
This is a funny one, actually, because I'm going to jump about a bit here, because since I've retired, and I may have been speaking about it to you the other day, John, since I've retired from racing and now at GTN, I've kind of hung on to these paces and times and powers that I used to be able to do. And each time I head out, and you might have seen videos on GTN where we're doing some crazy challenges, and I always think, oh yeah, like my FTP was 380 or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I'll do this at 350 watts, why not? I can't do that anymore. Obviously, I don't do the training for that. So I put myself in an absolute hurt locker and a horrible place. And because the camera's on me, I do not give up. So in some ways, I feel like my mental strength has come on so much actually since then. So if I went back to racing, I might actually have an extra an extra arm to me. But yeah, in terms of actually just training mental strength, I do think, like, I'm not going to go down the full like Brett Sutton route of putting you on a treadmill in the corner of a room, but I do think you do need to kind of put yourselves in some situations such as some of those cold winter rides. You know, I don't go and do them week in, week out, but they are important. They are good. You know, to occasionally be put in those situations. It's okay to bonk every so often on a ride or a run. Again, that like 10K, just trying to get yourself home, those really shape you as an athlete. But yeah, also just pushing yourself, and I think that's also where sometimes having a training squad or a club that you can go along to, because ultimately you're going to get pushed by other people, and that's is putting you out of your comfort zone and really testing you mentally. Yeah, I mean, I could go on about mental strength for a very long time. I think there's so much you can do there.
How can you train that then, Mark? How do you develop that further then? What would the tips be that you give?
It's a really tricky one. It's not something I've actually really thought of for actually genuinely training. I would suggest doing some of the sessions that you do really. I think just focusing on putting yourself in a slightly darker place every so often for those. As I mentioned before, like not day in, day out or week in, week out, but also taking on some of those sessions that are almost unachievable, and being able, accepting that you may not complete it, but giving it your all. I think a lot of people do workouts that they can always accomplish and always achieve, so they can tick it off. But there's no shame. And I think if you speak to most pro athletes, pretty much every week, they will not complete a workout. And that is something that can make you really tough mentally, because you will literally push yourself above and beyond to try and complete it, even if you don't. Yeah, I'm sure there's more there. If I think of something later on, I'll come back to that.
I think it was quite good. I think surrounding yourself with the better people, getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and this is stuff we've talked about in the groups before. It's sort of surrounding yourself with the better people, the better athletes.
Yeah, and I also just to come back to that. I mean, I think a lot of people, and you see this a lot in pro athletes, is they surround themselves with people that they're better than because it makes them feel better. But yeah, it's good to be surrounded by people that are pushing you day in, day out. Yeah.
So we've got sports psychologist.
Yeah, of course, a sports psychologist I would 100% recommend.
Visualization.
Yeah. If you're, I mean, visualizations, it's a funny one actually for such a long race. I used to do visualization a lot ahead of swimming, because obviously you're racing for sort of 4 or 5 minutes. So you're literally working through, standing up onto the blocks, diving off, and paces you need to hit. But for triathlon, it's such a long race, so kind of trying to visualize all of that. But what is good is sort of looking through in your, like, thinking through the transition areas and stuff like that. So essentially trying to take out those complicated and stressful bits, so that you can just focus on the job at hand. So when you're swimming, just focusing on the swim, and you know that you visualize the transition area 5 times through already before you even started racing. You know where everything is.
And knowing sometimes that you will make a mistake, and just accepting the fact that you make a mistake and then just move on forward.
Absolutely. And to be honest, it was something I was really bad at early on, because I mean, triathlon, there are so many variables in it. Like coming from swimming, where the worst you could do is maybe full start or miss the wall on a turn. Suddenly coming into triathlon, it's like you can't get your wetsuit undone, you can't buckle your helmet up, you drop this, your bottle flies out, you mess your nutrition up.
Well, I've never done one, so that's going to be the new thing for me. But it doesn't faze me.
Oh, that's
the challenge
good.
is what I want, and like. But I was just thinking about something then. Something happened to me in 2019, a bit of a challenge, which John and Ross know about and stuff. But luckily, I had a coach who Jonathan knows, and probably a few others know, and he gave me structure still, so it kept me going, and he sort of knew me. And looking back now, when I was out on some of them runs on my own, like say dark winter nights still and stuff like that, you have a moment still because you think about these things in life. Well, you still do. I think everybody does. And when I'm at times now, when I'm digging deep and in races or somewhere, you know, on a bike or whatever, I think back to them moments and think I wasn't tired then, but I had a moment. But now I'm tired. You know, I look back on that and use that as a positive for me. And it just thinking about then, and I realised that I use it now.
Yeah,
I use that tragedy as a positive, and plus it works for me more so now.
Yeah, I mean something. I mean, kind of branching on from that, and you sort of saying like looking back on something that was kind of almost harder in some respects.
Difficult.
Yeah, I like something I learned from my last coach was basically making workouts harder than race days. So when you stand on that start line, you know that you've been to that horrible dark place, you've done something more challenging, and being, you know, so confident that you can do this today. So we would occasionally do sort of Ironman 70.3 kind of mock workouts, but harder. So they were almost, again, as I sort of said before, they were designed to break you. You wouldn't do them often, but yeah, we would drop them in.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Cool. I can see some other questions dropping in down here.
So a couple of questions. What do you think of Joe Skipper and his erratic training plan?
I said that just to you, Millsy, not to everyone.
I really like Joe. He's a good mate of mine. But I must admit, I wish someone would take him under their arm and coach him properly, because he's such a talent. And he has a lot of qualities like Lionel Sanders. Really, he's quite stubborn and thinks he knows the way. And yeah, it's quite hard to convince him otherwise. But yeah, it's good to kind of mix your training up continually, so rather than just getting stuck in a rut. But I think Joe does do some questionable things. I won't delve into those, but I think you don't want to be too erratic with your training. Anyway, we won't go into Joe too much. Have we got any others? We got who do you think is the most upcoming British Ironman?
Or triathlete, I think.
Yeah, okay. I'm actually, whilst she's not technically racing for Britain, but does come from Britain, Imogen Simmons is a fantastic talent. I'm really impressed by her. And she just really kind of pushed Daniela Reef the other weekend out in Dubai. So yeah, I'm quite impressed by her. Men, I mean, Joe, I mean, yeah, we've said it. Just if he can kind of nail it on race day, yeah, he's an incredible talent.
Someone else has put in here talking about their job getting in their way of training, not having the time and energy to stick to training program. Have you got any sort of like? Sorry, John, I've gone.
Yeah, I was going to say that was kind of one of my questions. So just because I know that Mark, what Mark does really, really well is how do you balance like training and life? What is that encapsulating what's been asked earlier? What are the keys there to be successful?
From my own perspective, or do you want from a coaching kind of?
From both coaching and yours. I think they're one of
my training's pretty erratic these days, anyway. But I'm actually going to go from a coaching perspective, just because I think it's more relevant for everyone. So initially, when I start coaching anyone, I ask, like straight off, I ask for their weekly schedule. I know that's quite hard. Not everyone's week is the same, but it is so important, as I mentioned earlier, that your training has to fit around your life and your work, not your life around the training, to actually make it work and to get the most from yourself. And I think that's the biggest mistake that a lot of people make. They set themselves 12, 15 hours of training per week to train for an Ironman, and it's just unachievable around a working week, family, other social commitments, etc. Of course, there is a bit of a trade-off. You do need to make some sacrifices, but use that example earlier. If you have a hellish day at work, suddenly a load of meetings are landed on you, you've got to travel for work, and then you're still trying to do 2 meaty sessions that day, you might get through that day, but ultimately it's going to have a knock on the subsequent days, and you're going to find yourself not hitting key workouts, or maybe a week later you're in a bit of a hole, you're ill. So it's really important to be dynamic with your workout, and that's kind of the biggest thing that I do and with the athletes, is just making sure we've got that rapport and the communication, and making sure we're adapting the workouts. So it's not necessarily, and this is the important thing, you're not going, okay, well, I'm going to miss the workout today. It's actually adapting the week from that. It's going, okay, well, I can't do that key workout today, but we can have a look at the rest of the week and see how we can fit or amalgamate a workout, so that we're still getting the quality there, and we're still working on that specific intensity, without just simply trying to budge workouts back a day, which I know a lot of people do, and they get to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they've got all their workouts blocked together. So yeah, again, that's a broad one, but the important thing is just making sure that your training fits around your work in your life, not the other way around.
Okay.
And also, sorry, and as I mentioned earlier, also just obviously respecting other stresses on your body, mental, physical, that sleep.
Knowing your own body.
Absolutely, and that's I mean, I can keep going.
Do you wish you would have listened to your body a bit more?
100%. And like, again, this is.
Could you have become an Olympian if you would have done? I'm saying yes. I'm putting my hand. I'm putting. I think.
I'm not going to answer that. I don't know. I'd love to have, obviously.
Maybe in a better coaching regime, and
I
probably
honestly,
more strength and conditioning and rest and everything. Diet.
I wish I'd listened to my body as a youngster. I was constantly having a runny nose and coughing and ill, and obviously
kids do.
now looking, and I was so motivated. And just to be clear, it wasn't my parents dragging me to the swimming pool each day. It was pretty much the other way around, and I was just so focused. I did everything the coach said, but I wish, looking back now, I mean, the signs were so clear. I was run down most weeks and still trying to kill myself in training. But in terms of like listening to your body, I'm big advocate of that, but there's also some other great metrics out there. Heart rate variability is very good these days. I used it in the early days, and anyone that used it kind of like 4 or 5 years ago, I know it was a bit clunky. It was quite hard to pull the information from, but nowadays things like Whoop, or I'm trying to think of another, Athlete, I think it's called, are quite good for kind of just like saying, because there's days when you might wake up and you go, I feel really lethargic and a bit run down, but am I okay or am I actually run down and I need to take the day off? And the HRV is quite good at kind of going, well, no, you are a little bit lethargic today, but you can crack on, but just keep the intensity down. And then some days you might feel the same, and it'll say, no, there's something wrong. Your body's trying to recover. So I would, if anyone's kind of struggling with recovery, and
I've found in the last 3 years or more, I've known my body more, and just I think it's important that the coach knows you personally, knows what you do. And my job's more physical mental as well because of running the business, and also it's hard when I've worked all day in the cold out there on a roof doing whatever physical, coming home and then got to go out for a run for an hour, or not so hard now. I've got Swift in your house and on the bike. It's a bit easier in the warmth, but it's hard when you've been out in the cold all day and you come home and you got to go back out in your warm house. Got to go back out there, get yourself with your back's aching, your legs aching. Some days I've just gone enough, and my coach has gone, well, don't worry, you're there. Don't worry, just have a rest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important.
Be okay with it. And it hasn't really dropped anything. I haven't done anything. It hasn't affected me in any way. It's actually done me better.
Yeah.
Because knowing that you're not under that stress, that pressure of you've got to get out there, which I did do at one time. Started to run with just an aching lower back because it's just standing all day and my back's aching already before I go out and do an hour and a half run or an hour's run. It's hard work. You've been in the warmth all day and then you're coming outside again on the night, your back's aching, sweating. So summer and winter's no different to me.
Yeah.
So, but they helps. It has helped.
Yeah, and also, I mean, for the women, the female out there, also menstrual cycle. I mean, it's something I've had to. I've been learning a lot about for the female athletes in my team, and I've been coaching. It's just actually the few days before, and you can't sustain a normal training schedule. When your body's going through that. So respecting these things is really, really important.
Yeah, food and diet and everything. Yes, it's hard. It's a discipline.
Yeah. Have you got any other questions?
Yeah, mental strategies mid-race when things are well.
Yeah, that's good. Like so many things obviously can go wrong. So mechanical things, obviously that's out of your control. Obviously the main thing is to stay calm in those instances. It is out of your control, so you can only do what you can do. Again, also kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, it is a learning, it's an experience. I had a lot of these in my first year or two of racing triathlon because I didn't know much about cycling, so I was putting my bike together terribly, wasn't maintaining it. I was turning up to these big races and having technical issues and mechanicals. But in terms of like if anything else is going wrong, or you're just not feeling good, like I used to often think of, I had cues that I would think of during racing. So one in particular for running, because that's often when people really start to feel it in a triathlon. I had this term arrows. And what that was referring to, and it came from one of my first triathlon coaches, was the knee drive in running and that arrow, that pointing forward. And because often when you do start to fatigue, your hips start to go and you don't drive your knees up as much. And that was all it needed, just that cue in my head, arrows. And I thought of keeping my body upright, not slumping, trying to drive my knee forward and basically improve my posture. And that's something that kind of like we work on in training. So I think it's like, things that you can work on in training that can be really good. So finding those little cues or things you can say to yourself. And that was certainly a strategy that helped a lot for me. Trying to think of any others. You can also just breaking up the race as well. Because obviously, I think looking at something like an Ironman 70.3, it's an overwhelming distance. Obviously it's broken up into swim, bike, run, but a 90k or 180k bike is a heck of a long way. So looking for those pointers on the course, or even points that you're going to be taking nutrition on, is a really nice way of just breaking it up, and kind of compartmentalizing the race and ticking off those each sections, so having the goals along the way.
Cool.
Really good one.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Biggest cues for overtraining and how to avoid injury setbacks.
Overtraining is kind of a funny one actually. It does hit people in different ways, but one of the common ones is that you'll start to feel quite flat in training, but not just like 1 or 2 sessions, pretty much every session, just struggling to either get yourself out of the door, get yourself out of bed, and get yourself to the session, and then really struggling to get going. Now, the interesting thing, and the bit that kind of fools a lot of people, and why so many people really do dig themselves a hole, is that because quite often you might feel flat at the start, but once you get going and warmed up, you might actually still hit quite a good session, albeit maybe not your best, but you actually still perhaps hit your numbers or close to. And that's what I did for a very long time. And I did that quite a lot of times during my career. I was like, oh, well, I'm still hitting the numbers, but I wasn't right. You might also see a change in your heart rate. So obviously the significant one is your resting heart rate goes up. Now, interestingly, some people report different things during workouts. Some people find their heart rates go sky high. Other people just find their heart rate stays quite low and they really struggle to get it up, which is what I had. It was a clear sign that I just can't actually push myself. I can't go deep and push myself as much. Another thing that I had was I was oddly struggling to sleep, which sounds weird because you're so tired, you're overtrained, but I couldn't sleep. So yeah, that was and then with your HRV, if you are taking that, you'd see your HRV plummet through the floor. So yeah,
I think. Sorry, go on, Mal.
Have you got any superstitions before rest?
I actually don't, but I do always get on my bike the same side, or even though I can get on both sides, and it's weird, like I might be running out of transition. And
Have you ever done it and got on your bike and then you've got back off again?
But I quite often run out of transition with my bike on my left hand side, and I'm getting to the line and I'm like, no, I'm like, go to the right, like, switching around to the other side, even if it means like clashing into other people.
Oh God.
And I don't know why I do that, but yeah.
No lucky mascots or anything like it,
no, sadly I don't.
What I was going to say is, and that was a great question as well, Mal, about superstitions, but going back to what you're saying about the cues and stuff, I think that's quite, for everyone, for the people who are not necessarily athletes as well, those cues that you just gave there for things to notice can be relevant in life as well. You know, if you're struggling to get going at the start of a day, forget going out to training sessions, you know, it can be a sign that you'll run down in life, you know, and you're maybe doing too much, maybe burning the oil too long, the nights, late nights, not looking after yourself. All those things you just listed there completely apply to people who don't necessarily train a lot at all or train, but just might be a reason that they need to take the foot off the gas just in life. If they're working too hard, they're not looking after themselves. There were some really good cues there for people to just to identify and notice for themselves. Not necessarily the athletes, but the people who just, if they are getting to start to be run down, they can have a little pause and go, right, I need to step back and go, where can I start to dial it in? Sleep's a big one, like you talked about. These are nice things that can be relevant in everyday life as well. And it's really important because they'll sit, and I know I've been through it, my wife's been through it, people I know have been through it, where they'll be like, well, I'm not training, so I must have loads of energy. And so I can stay up later, I can get up early, I don't have to worry about eating, my recovery is up and down, and still bang out 5, 6, 7, 8 day weeks of 9-10 hour days. And I think those cues you just mentioned there are really good indicators for people just in general as well, to see if they're starting to get run down and they can take a step back.
I actually, in all honesty, a couple of weeks ago was, I'm not training much at the moment, and I mean it. I might do 1 or 2 half-hour runs per week, maybe 1 ride, and that's it. And the other week, I actually felt overtrained because at work we were working so hard. I was doing some late hours. I wasn't sleeping well, wasn't eating well, and we just worked through one thing or another. Ended up doing some pretty big filming days and riding really hard, and it was totally out of the blue for me. And of course, again, as I said before, cameras on me, I'll push myself, I'll keep going until they stop. And a week or so later, I was trying to do a bit of a Zwift race with some friends, and they pummeled me, guys that I would normally beat. And it was shocking. I felt really bad for a good week or two. So I've actually kind of come off the gas a bit and allow myself to recover. So even, when you, as you say, Ross, like you think you've got all this, you think you're in a good place, you've got all this time, you're doing everything right, but actually, it sometimes can take you by surprise.
Well, we've got a question here around setting goals, I'd written this down as well. So in terms of achieving goals, how do you go about that? How do you make them realistic? And this bit is around racing, so like setting your pacing. But if you can try and articulate that as well as like a general, like how do you, when you've got a goal, how do you reverse engineer it, or what do you do to achieve those goals?
Yeah, so I think the first bit, obviously, about finding a realistic goal, only you can answer that really to a degree. Obviously, if it's a certain time or like an Ironman time, then a coach could possibly help you with kind of looking at threshold times or threshold paces times and heart rates, etc. But do find something that is achievable, because ultimately you don't want to set yourself up for complete failure and really not enjoy it along the way. First thing what I do when I set myself a goal is actually kind of work back and look at those micro goals. So the bits that I need to achieve along the way to get that. So for instance, if I was training for an Ironman and I'm coming from a cycling background, I'm obviously looking at the swimming and the running. I need to build them up, and I'd start looking at ways in which I could do that. And that might be, right, I'm going to get in the pool and I'm going to start swimming once a week. And I'm going to do that for the first month. For the running, I'm going to get myself up to running 30k a week. And they're your little goals for they can be your small goals, and you can get as in depth as you like as you go. But it's making sure that you've mapped that out rather than it just being this absurd goal in the distance with no pathway to it. So that's something I've always done, and possibly not even knowingly. I've often I break it down and look at what I need to achieve to get there. If you're wanting to go to the Ironman World Championships, what time do you need to achieve in your age group at Ironman Bolton, for instance, to normally get a slot to the Ironman World Championships? And then kind of reverse back from that, look at the splits, the swim, bike times, what that would require power. And we were getting very techie and detailed here, but it's like, I think a lot of people forget that, and they look at the end goal and like, okay, so I'm just training to try and get to the Ironman World Championships. What does that mean? That is really important. Again, a coach would probably be able to help you with that.
Okay, awesome. We've got sort of 3 minutes until we're coming to the end, guys. So have we got any further questions? Roscoe?
Someone has asked, how hard is it to train now you have a full-time job? And you know what?
That was me, sorry. That was me.
Oh, yeah, cool. You know what? Like, I've got a lot of respect, having, been the pro athlete, and now I've been trying to train and work. Admittedly, I've gone the opposite way. Like, I obviously previously I was a pro athlete and I was improving. Now I've got to obviously substantially drop my training to be able to do a full-time job. So I'm not going to continue to improve. So my priorities have changed. Like, I'm not going to head out the door every evening and do training.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 32, so relatively young. Yeah.
Still get there.
But my priorities have changed. So, utmost respect to everyone out there, training hard for an Ironman, but I'm only going to get slow myself. So if my partner wants to go out in the evening for a nice walk, of course I'm going to drop everything and go for a walk.
You don't fancy them hard training days again? Maybe.
I do miss them, but it has given me a whole different perspective and respect on trying to fit in around work, because I do know like how hard it is now. The sleep, as we've mentioned time and time again, like trying to get up early, get a workout in before work, and the impact that has on just life.
Mentally thinking about work when you're trying to train, it's really hard.
Yeah, and also, you know, having a family and trying to be there for them and get the training in. You know, you have minimal time around your working life, and then to take that all up with training, that's
you can always come back to it.
Yeah, true.
Maybe your job will sponsor you.
Maybe.
Mal's going to have that racing by the end of this call.
Yeah.
Why not?
All right, guys, we've got, I think we've got like 1 minute left now. So is there one last question? I have got loads of questions, but
I don't need to rush off. So if anyone does want to ask any,
okay. So I think what we'll do is we'll take one more question, then we'll kind of formally close it, and then Mark will stay on if anyone's got any questions directly to him. So is anybody else? I think that if I'll give you 10 seconds. Then
go on. No, I can add to that. So the pacing question, I think you got most of it there, Jonathan. But part of it was in a race. So you have your goals, and I'm quite analytical with what I do. So I know what I can do, but how? Probably only from experience. If I'd have known what I know now back then, I'd have changed how I raced initially. And what I see all the time in Ironman racing is people setting off like a madman or woman right at the start, particularly on the bike, and they get carried away in the moment, and it's really difficult for people to hold back. So I think it's that. So going back to the mental strength, there's a mental strength of pushing yourself, and I think if you're drawn to endurance athletic events, you have that inherent nature, but there's also a mental strength in holding back and understanding, not getting carried away.
Yeah,
and I think it was along that line, the second part of that initial question that sort of Jonathan had.
Yeah, and I've got to be honest, it's something I'm really bad at, which is why I primarily focused on short distance stuff, because I do like pushing myself and going hard, and but I have had to learn about that patience, and that is basically, you know, it is so hard. If, as you say, people go tearing off at the start, and you're like, well, I should be beating them, but you've got to stick to your numbers, and it's being true to yourself, knowing what, you know, believing in what you have set out, and again going in with those targets, those goals, knowing exactly what you need to hit, and being confident in those. That's what's really important. But yeah, you are absolutely right. It can take a ton of mental strength to actually be patient in those instances.
And the other thing I was thinking as well, so going way back, I'm quite a bit older than you, but so I was quite good at canoe slalom back in the day. Under 18, second in the world. I was heading for the Olympics, doing all that sort of stuff.
Nice.
Had similar things with coach. I didn't have a formal coach, but every session I smashed out twice a day, 7 days a week, for about 5 years, and basically smashed myself into pieces in the end. But I was up there, and guys that I beat at the Junior Worlds were Olympic champions. I trained with world champions, Olympic medalists, all sorts of things, and I fell asleep dreaming about it, doing all of that. And then I lost the love. 24, 25 at uni. Didn't want to know anymore, never did anything for quite a while. And actually getting into triathlon later on in life, my goals are different. And that's perhaps what because you've been so good at it, you still being involved with it is difficult. If you took up, I don't know, skydiving now or something like that, would be easier, because you wouldn't have those lofty goals. You wouldn't see your performance dropping away. If I got back in a canoe, I'd be all right at it, but I would be nothing like I was back then. And it's really hard to let go of that initial, your ability then, and realizing that family, life, work, age, everything. So it'll be hard if you stick around triathlon. It's quite hard, because you want to race, you can race, you'll still be awesomely good.
Yeah,
but maybe not as good as you were when you were mid-20s, but late 20s.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head really there, because I have. It's exactly it. I know I'm not going to be as good. So actually, if I lined up and did a Ironman 70.3 tomorrow, people would beat me, and it would frustrate me, and I wouldn't enjoy it. And but that said, I know I've been saying that I'm not training that much. I'm trying to build it back in again and get myself back on track. And I've set myself some challenges at things that I haven't really done before. So kind of similar to yourself, getting stuck into triathlon now. So it also why I did things like Norseman, because it's not about time, it was about the experience and just meeting and doing. And I got, you know, I was never able to do races like that, despite always wanting to do them, because they didn't fit into the program. You didn't gain points from them towards Olympics or 70.3 worlds. And they took a heck of a lot out of you and you require different training. Whereas now I'm like, well, I just want to enjoy myself. So I'm going and doing those races. I'm shying away from the ones that I would be able to compare previous times on, but I have actually entered Brighton Marathon because I've never actually done a straight marathon. So a couple of us are going after, you know, set ourselves a pretty ambitious time there. But you're right, like that's definitely in that boat.
I think what's been really insightful for me especially, and hearing what you were saying, I'm sure it will relate to other people, is understanding that your priorities have changed and that you're good with that.
Yeah.
And I think just hearing you talk about doing races for different reasons, and actually enjoying it. Like I've had races, and I've had it in other experiences as well, where you just stop and take in what you're doing, and you suddenly realize that you're racing down the coast of some country, and like there's beautiful sea to one side and a mountain range to the other, and then all of a sudden you're like, right, I'm back in the race. But I think listening to you talk about that now, and I'm sure people will be able to relate to, your priorities have changed and you're cool with that as well. And yeah, of course you're going to have stuff that comes up and you're going to set yourself new challenges, but to hear you talk about that is really, it's really insightful for me especially, but I'm sure it will relate to other people there, that that's okay to have these priorities change, new challenges come up, and to hear you talk about that, it's really refreshing as well, because I think some people will get caught into the trap of I've got to keep trying to hit that goal of qualifying for Kona or qualifying for this or whatever it might be, to the point where they don't even enjoy the experience, and you've removed all that living that could have been done whilst you're achieving something. You've just sort of outmanaged the goal and not really enjoyed the whole process at all.
Yeah, 100%. And I did that as I've explained a few times in my career, and because you felt like you invested so much time into it, you don't want to pull yourself away from it. And particularly when I moved from short distance to the longer distance racing, I probably, in all honesty, should have done that 2 or 3 years earlier. I'd always thought about it, and I kind of just floated along for 2 or 3 years, not really enjoying it. Ultimately, I loved the longer distance racing, had a really good time with it. It suited me much better, really. But again, GTN, new priorities now, but I'm so happy, and it's not what I was striving for, going for initially. But my goodness, like I think you said earlier, Ross, possibly is better.
Yeah,
arguably, I don't know, but better than having gone to the Olympics. I don't know. I am really happy in my life, and I've got a lovely partner, lovely house, and we've got a great life. So yeah.
So
do you do any other sports as well?
Go on then, Mark.
Any other sports you do? Boxing, karate, anything? No? Tried anything?
I've always been pretty all round. So like, I love surfing. Obviously mountain bike, but that's cycling really. So I kind of throw myself into anything. I'm trying to get better at tennis at the moment, because that's one sport that I could never crack as a kid. And my partner loves tennis, so we.
There you go then.
So Tim wants to know, and we all want to know as well, what's your the Brighton Marathon? What's the ridiculous time that you've set yourself? It's going to be.
There's a group of us. It's myself, Sam Pichter, who's been on the channel a few times, people might know. James Kunema, so very good traffic, and we're going after sub 2 hours 30.
Yeah, I was ambitious by saying sub 240.
It's ambitious enough that I'm really psyched about it, but also challenging enough that I'm teetering on the edge, going, it's unachievable.
Is that an average time across all of you? Is that an average time across all of you?
Yeah. I probably should put that in there, shouldn't I? But yeah, I'm going to need it's going to require some serious training, but I need that actually. I always set myself a goal each year, because otherwise I just kind of get lost and don't do anything. So it's quite nice to have that motivation. So.
Brilliant. That's really good. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks for sharing all your good stuff. And I know the people on the chat have shared, and there'll probably some more questions. And there's people that have not managed to join us tonight, but already messaged to say, look, we're recording this, so they're gonna watch it when we send it out to them. So no doubt we'll get some more questions coming through. I mean, for the guys who are still here, where's the best place to find out follow your stuff and see where you're at?
Yeah, head on over to YouTube and search Global Triathlon Network, or GTN. And yeah, we have, as I said earlier, a video going out every day. A lot of it is educational, sort of how-to videos, how to train. And you hear me? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, a lot of it's educational how-to stuff, but we also got a lot of entertaining stuff on there, like me doing Norseman, or trying to do an Everesting run, or break sub 4 minutes downhill. We've actually got some fun stuff coming out next week. I'm showing you my commute to work, which has a bit of a twist to it. So yeah.
Excellent. And then Instagram as well, they can find your stuff on there. And brilliant. Yeah. Oh, I really appreciate it. And big thanks for everyone in the chat as well, from coming on.
Sure. Yeah, thanks ever so much everyone for joining. Yeah.
Thanks guys. Cheers for your questions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, John.
Cheers, guys.